Welcome into Hand Raised Guys, presented by Comer Heating and Air, Southern Air Conditioning and Heating. I'm Neal McCready. Today, I'm joined on the show by Chase Parham, who's going to sit down with On Three's Robbie Faulk. They'll talk Mississippi State, Ole Miss baseball, and much, much more about the Bulldogs and more. Then I visit with Blake Lovell of Southeastern14.com. We talk about the latest in the saga at Kentucky as they work to replace John Calipari, who, of course, left for Arkansas. He was announced formally on Wednesday in Fayetteville. Been a big news day in Lexington. Scott Drew said no. Not a big surprise. I think a lot of people thought that it was a little bit of a reach for him to leave Baylor after all these years at the age of 53. He did not. His family did not want to go. Reports out this hour that Kentucky made another run at Danny Hurley, the Connecticut coach, coming off of a second consecutive national championship on Monday. I'm not going to pretend to be Kentucky sourced here, but from all accounts, Danny Hurley is going to stay in stores. And so kind of all eyes now on what Kentucky does. Do they wait for Billy Donovan, the head coach of the Chicago Bulls? Bulls still headed for the playoffs, which start next week in the NBA. Do they turn their attention to Bruce Pearl at Auburn? I guess Chris Beard at Ole Miss could get mentioned, although it feels like he's pretty far down the list a little bit right now. But at some point, they have to hire a coach at Kentucky, and they're finding out that it's a little bit harder to do than sometimes you think. Nate Oats has an $18 million buyout, the Alabama coach. He's indicated that he is going to stay in Tuscaloosa. So we'll talk to Blake about all of those things. Full disclosure, this interview was taped around 10 o'clock this morning before Scott Drew had made a decision. So we sort of covered the ground, whether he would take it, whether he wouldn't, and what would happen if he didn't. So we'll get to all of that in a moment. First, I want to tell you that we're brought to you by Comer Heating and Air, Southern Air Conditioning and Heating. The high in Oxford on Saturday is 79 degrees, which means we're 1 degree from the 80s, which means we're right around the corner from the 90s. You've probably turned the air conditioner on by now. If it's making a noise, if it's not cooling the way you need it to, now's the time to get it checked out. Comer Heating and Air, Southern Air Conditioning and Heating are the people to call. Different names, same great people, products, and services. If you live in Oxford, Batesville, Tupelo, or the surrounding area, call our friends at Comer, 662-801-1777. If you live in Hernando, Memphis, or the surrounding area, call Southern, 662-429-4429. Like I said, temperatures are warming up. It's time to get that air conditioner ready to roll. Mention when you talk to Comer or Southern that you heard about this ad here on this podcast. You get 25% off your spring cleaning at Comer and Southern. This is an extra edition of Blue Sky Live, the Oxford Exxon podcast. That will be up for you on Friday morning, maybe before that. Brought to you by the Oxford Exxon, Highway 6 West in Oxford. All Blue Sky locations all over Mississippi. Fill up inside, outside. Get your gas outside. Fill up inside. Got the ribs, sudsy goodness, 34-degree cooler. All sorts of beer selections there. This big Blue Sky Superstore, tongue twister, in Macomb is wide open. So check all of that out at Blue Sky and the Oxford Exxon. I'm in the Clark Ford Studios, 662-257-1900. Call that number. Ask for our buddy Corey Clark. Tell Corey what Ford product you're looking for. He'll send you a quote within 15 minutes in business hours. It's right to the bottom line. There's no hassle. There's no hackle. You get your quote. The rest is completely up to you. You can shop that quote around. You can do what I've done, what I recommend that you do, and that's hop into a Clark Ford today. Again, 662-257-1900. The people at Clark Ford want to be your car guy. They want to be your truck guy. They'll prove to you what that means when you make the call, 662-257-1900. After the interviews tonight, if you want, I'll stick around. I'll take some calls on the Campbell Clinic Hotline. The Campbell Clinic is in Oxford now. 2608 South Lamar Boulevard, Suite 102, just across the street from the cottages at Hooper Hollow. The Campbell Clinic provides full-service orthopedic care, everything from sports medicine to foot and ankle surgery to spine and total joint care, pediatric orthopedics, physical therapy, and more. To book an appointment, go to campbellclinicoxford.com or call 901-759-3111. Walk-ins always welcome at the Campbell Clinic, Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. So a couple of people in the thread already asking a couple of questions. Tiger, I haven't been able to keep up. I saw where Tiger was like even par, maybe one under, one over. I can't remember which one it was. I'll catch you up on some masters, maybe between interviews. I'll pull up a leaderboard, some things of that nature. Big NBA night tonight. Still some seeding going on. Keeping up with that. Obviously, the Kentucky story. Grind wants to know if I think the Cubs can win the division this year. I don't think the Cubs can win the division. I don't think they have enough pitching. Justin Steele's out right now. Jamison Tyone is out right now. The great Kyle Hendricks, who will always go down as the guy that through Game 6 of the National League Championship Series in 2016, beat the Dodgers, beat Clayton Kershaw, got the Cubs to the World Series, started Game 3, started Game 7. Kyle Hendricks will always have a very special place in my heart as a Cubs fan, but he looks like the best is behind him. And without those three, I just don't know that there's enough pitching on that team, even in what is somewhat shaky division with the Cardinals not playing particularly well. Pirates are so young. Reds are young. Brewers are not the team they were a year ago when they had Corbin Burns and Brandon Woodruff and those guys. So I don't know. My guess is no, the Cubs can't win. But the division is so mediocre that someone has to, and maybe that gives them a chance. All right, we'll talk about those things and more. Like I said, I'll get to these two interviews. On the other side, I'll be happy to take calls if anybody wants to call in here on what's turned into a beautiful Thursday evening in Oxford after about 3 days of rain. The clouds have cleared. It's going to be a great weekend for baseball, for the Grove Bowl games, all of those things here in Oxford this weekend. Sun's coming out now. It's going to get warm over the course of the weekend. So if you're coming up, the weather is cooperating with you. Mother Nature has decided to shine on North Mississippi this weekend after 3 days of just torrential rain. But anyway, we'll get to all of that in a little bit. First, let's get to the Campbell Clinic Hotline. Let's preview the Bulldogs and the Rebels. Robbie Faulk covers Mississippi State for On 3, and he sat down with Chase Parham earlier this week. Enjoy.
Now joining the Campbell Clinic Hotline, Robbie Faulk, Maroon and White Daily with On 3, Thunder and Lightning, supertalk.fm for that. Robbie, good to see you. Ole Miss and State this weekend. And you and I talking before the show, I'm going to get into this a little more minutia, but a lot of parallels that Ole Miss fans, State fans don't want from a program standpoint. They both win national titles, both kind of fall off the face of the earth for a little while. And Ole Miss pretty frustrated right now from a fan base. They're 3-9 in the SEC, coming off back-to-back sweeps to Kentucky and Arkansas, which pretty big good teams, but still back-to-back sweeps. And facing a Mississippi State team that they haven't won a series against since 2015. They had a 5-run comeback in the ninth in 2015 to sweep that series. I said on my other show this morning, Nick Perkins was the hero, and I don't know where Nick has been for like the last 9 years now. His time has moved on from that. But we'll start here. State 6-6 has kind of steadied this thing a little bit. Where do you just overall sort of see the Bulldogs after a couple of years of pretty bad futility?
I think what they've been missing the last 2 years is there this year, and that's the dugout has become a little more firm. You got some personalities in there that'll take a game over, that'll take a locker room over, and I think that's kind of meshed well with what Chris Lemonis does from a personality standpoint. He's not a guy that likes to manufacture a lot of that, motivation in the locker room. He's one of those coaches he's basically a manager. He likes to be able to put the pieces into place and let the wheel start turning itself. And that's what he had when he went to the College World Series in 2019 and he won the national championship in 2021. You have a Jake Mangum and Elijah McNamee, Tanner Allen, Jordan Westberg, Justin Foscue. Those are good pieces in 19. And then in 2021, you had a ton of guys like that while it might not have been as talented as the 19 team, they were guys that would go out there and will themselves to wins. You didn't have that the last 2 years, I don't think. You didn't have a Tanner Allen or a Jake Mangum in that locker room. You had some talent, but those guys just didn't have that attitude. And while, I took a little heat on Saturday when I said I liked what Johnny Long brought to the table, I liked that energy. While maybe you don't want to see that happen, that's the kind of guy that Mississippi State's been missing. Last year against South Carolina's chirping from the dugout. They hit a big home run. They come around the bases. They're talking trash to the dugout. They're stomping on home plate, and nobody did anything. They just kind of stood around. That would never happen with Johnny Long behind the plate. So I think that's kind of what's changed for them is you have a little bit of that attitude back. with a David Mershon, a guy at shortstop that everybody probably hates except for Mississippi State people because he's always talking back there. Those are the kind of personalities Mississippi State's missed. And I think that's definitely helped move this thing in the right direction. They're not perfect. They're 6-6. They've lost 6 non-conference games. But you can see this team when they get down in a ball game, they're able to get back in it because of guys like that.
And I think that is a pretty good indicator of kind of what's going on with Ole Miss too, because they haven't had a lot of punchback. It's been kind of once they get down, they get, and it's, I think this goes deeper and wasn't necessarily where I was expecting the conversation to go, but it's why development is so important to get guys in your program that sort of have that attitude, have that culture, and you're not counting on the portal guys to all come in and implement that themselves. Like when the portal guys come in and there's no great backbone of a roster already there, it's kind of rudderless. Like you don't really know what direction to go, and they all kind of bring stuff in their former places. But if you can get some of that attitude and get that ingrained in, and then let the portal guys see, hey, this is how we do things, this is where we move, that's a whole different scenario. I mean, from an Ole Miss standpoint, it's what Kiffin did so poorly in 22, did really well in 23, and you saw the differences from a portal standpoint. It does kind of feel like Lamonis was able to go, hey, we're going to establish some pieces here, and then we're going to move out from there.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think they misevaluated some guys from a personality standpoint and from just a talent standpoint in their past recruiting classes. And it's in baseball, this, you cover it better than anybody. You have to recruit these guys so far out. You have no clue what they're going to turn into. You're recruiting them at 14 years old. And what's this kid going to look like when he gets to be 18, 19? We don't know that. So that it's a very difficult process, and you have to be really good at it, and you have to be really lucky too. And it's kind of the same way in the portal. You don't know how these guys are going to react when they get into a roster of your guys and they start competing, and you bring them in from Arizona or California or someplace like that to Mississippi. You really don't know what that's going to look like until they actually get here. And State's gotten some good transfer guys. They've gotten some that haven't helped them at all. And when you put your eggs in that basket, or if you miss on some guys that could really make a difference, you don't really have a guy that can come in and step in and kind of replace what you've lost. So I think the portal has definitely been, and it's not just baseball. I think it's anything. It's really been kind of a 50-50 coin flip kind of deal. You don't really know what you're going to get. And some people have attacked it differently than others, but I think in baseball, you're right. I think you do have to have that developmental piece of what you're doing in your recruiting classes to really sustain.
Fan base wise, administration, however you want to answer this, how bad did it get at the end of last year? Is it really, really kind of kept going and going and going? And then was there true danger with his job at the end of last season?
I think that there was kind of a lockstep with Mississippi State fans. They were kind of ready for a change. And I do think that it was getting close. A lot of the people that I guess you want to say give a lot of money, a lot of people that are very involved in baseball, were ready for a change and a move in a different direction. Chris Lamonis talked to Zach Selman. They had a good conversation. He had made the change at pitching coach with Scott Foxhall, and Lamonis was very confident that he was going to be able to get this thing back on track. And Zach Selman trusted in him. He believed in what he was saying, gave him an opportunity. He said he was going to go out and get a really good pitching coach. I feel like he did that with Justin Parker. And I thought he got some good pieces in the portal, and he missed some big pieces too. They had a really good chance of getting Luke Holman from Alabama, who would have been an ace on this team. And at this point, when you look at what Mississippi State's done from a starting pitching standpoint, it would be one of the better starting rotations in the league with Cal Steven, Drangelo Sanja, and Luke Holman. That would be a really good 1 through 3 there. That was a big miss. And then Braden Montgomery was rumored to Mississippi State. They felt good about him. They felt like they could get him. They put all their eggs in that basket in center field, and he decided to go to Texas A&M. Those were 2 big misses. And, they were in the game last year with Paul Skeens, ended up going to LSU. So he's missed some opportunities to really kind of elevate this thing, but I feel like for the most part, he's starting to get Mississippi State back on track and in that right direction. So so far, I think people are starting to come around a little bit, but you still have a lot of the fan base that's kind of fractured at this point.
Did a lot of that happen? I guess, you get the wins against LSU, and we didn't know that LSU was going to be 3-9 or whatever they were at that point. Was that a lot of the reclamation there of, hey, you get the national champions and you get two and you sort of get back in this thing, and they've treaded the water enough since then, including playing a pretty gritty series against Georgia last weekend.
Yeah, no doubt. I know LSU is not good, and it would be absolutely insane if they followed the same path as State will miss. I'm pulling for that so much. I want to see that, and then I want to see Arkansas win the national championship and do the same thing.
Yeah.
But anyway, they have not won. They had not beaten LSU in Starkville since 2003.
Oh wow,
that is. I can't even wrap my brain around that, because they've beaten LSU and Baton Rouge like 3 or 4 times during that same time frame. So it's really insane that happened. So getting over that hump there and winning that series, and you had a very good chance of sweeping it, I think people started to say, okay, this team looks a little different. And they lost back-to-back series to A&M in Florida, but had a chance to win the A&M series, looked competitive in 2 of the games. And then at Florida, you had a chance to sweep it. I think people started to say, this does feel a little different. So, and then fighting back with the adversity that they had against Georgia, people were coming around a little bit. Now, it's going to take a lot more than them just making the tournament this year to fully get this fan base back. But I do think that you're starting to see some support come around, people believing that there's some movement here. And, hopefully for them that continues.
Yeah, like you said, they missed big time opportunities in Gainesville that would have changed kind of everything right there as you look at it, and it's 6-6. And they have an opportunity against Ole Miss because of the way that Ole Miss has played against them in the past. They're the better team than Ole Miss right now. Then you get Auburn, and you get Alabama. And you get Missouri. I'm looking at State's finish here. If they don't make the postseason, it's actually kind of problematic. That's a pretty damn good schedule the rest of the way to make sure they at least get back into an NCAA regional.
And coming into the season, it looks like the hardest schedule they've ever had.
Mm-hmm.
And LSU's turned out to be a dud. The Florida, I think, is a fraud. And you look at Auburn, Auburn's been more competitive than the record says, but that's not a team that really scares you. Alabama's kind of becoming, what they usually are at this point. So yeah, it sets up really well. Arkansas has absolutely owned Mississippi State. So you're just trying to, can you somehow find a win in that series? And then, we'll see on Vanderbilt, but the rest of the series are winnable for them. It's their own fault if they don't get a 2 seed in the NCAA tournament at this point. It's going to take a massive run for them to somehow host. I don't expect that, but at this point, you're just trying to get in the tournament any way that you can and get back to Hoover, which I think they'll do. But that's kind of, the benchmark for this program is they want to host regionals and get to Omaha. And that's why you see some pushback from fans even now when you start talking about, well, if they can just get to the postseason, Lamona's will be safe. That's not the expectations for this team. That's not the expectations for Ole Miss. But this, when you kind of dig yourself in the hole Mississippi State's dug itself the last 2 years, showing that kind of progress is a good thing. It's getting back to where you were. You're not going to be able to just get back to Omaha this year. It's going to take some time.
Well, I'm going to avoid like the big time Long Bianco situation, but some of the differences in the fan bases there is that State has hosted regionals and super regionals and advanced to the College World Series in that traditional way that they've done it. Ole Miss right now coming into the year said, hey, just get back to the postseason, just get in. But part of that's because that's been their route. In 2022, they're the last team in. They're 14-16 in the SEC. They play well in the tournament. They win the national title. But you might not realize this. Ole Miss hasn't hosted a super regional game since 2009. It's been 15 years.
That's crazy.
They hosted 4 in 5 years, and then since then have not hosted one. They went to Lafayette in 2014. They lost super regionals at Arkansas, at Arizona. They were a national seed that had that Tennessee Tech loss there in 2018 when they would have hosted Texas the next week had they won that. So their route has been in a way to this year was just about getting back, and obviously that hasn't happened. I told you their RPI is in pretty decent shape, but the record is a mess right now. And I get asked this a lot from an Ole Miss perspective. And some of this is just because State's had a lot of really good teams since 2015. They've won the SEC, they've hosted regionals, they've done a lot of things. But it still is kind of an odd stat that it's been that long. State's won 7 straight series against Ole Miss on the weekends. And that came after Ole Miss sort of dominated in Starkville there for a while. They had won all the series in Starkville for a 10, 12-year period or whatever it was prior to that. What do you sort of make of it? And then from the state standpoint, I don't even really want to do the football thing where it's, more in-state kids or a lot of the cliche stuff that I don't really buy a lot of times with this game. Is there something ingrained in the programs in your mind that's allowed them to have the level of success that's odd for this series, considering both teams are pretty damn competitive nationally?
Yeah, and I can't really explain it either because during that stretch it started with John Cohen and
Mm-hmm.
then Andy Canizero and then Chris Amonis. You had 3 different coaches
Maybe Gary
during that.
Henderson too.
Gary Henderson, you're right. Gary Henderson was there after Canizero. So you're talking about 4 different coaches have been involved in this and different kind of teams every time. It hasn't always been, State has the best team or anything like that. It's, 16, I think State probably had the better team, but 17 and 18, those 2 teams shouldn't have beaten Ole Miss, I don't think. In
Mm-hmm.
17, they swept, right, in Oxford. And then 18, they had the walk-off home run. That was Gary Henderson, and that was a team that was really scuffling at the time. They started 1-7 in SEC play, and I don't know if I can explain it. I think Jake Mangum had a lot to do with kind of getting the ball rolling. He was a Mississippi guy. You had some Mississippi guys on that team. They made it an important series, an important game, and Jake Mangum had a lot of success in that series. Luke Alexander, who was not necessarily a guy that you would look at in that lineup and talk about on a routine basis, he hurt Ole Miss on multiple occasions. Mississippi guy from Belmont.
Sure.
I do think that that's kind of been at the forefront with a lot of these guys, and they've kind of put a little extra on it. And sometimes when you get that rolling, it kind of gets in the back of your head, just like we talked about with State and LSU. When LSU comes to town, it's just in the back of your head. We haven't beat them since 2003. Ole Miss, I don't know if they're thinking that or not. A lot of these guys are from Florida and California and things like that. I don't know if they're thinking that or not, but I know it can get in the back of your head sometimes that we have a long losing streak right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that's the case or not. I just know it's been really strange because of all the different teams that Mississippi State has put out on the field and all the different, dynamics that they've had, the different coaches, Tommy John injuries, they've still found a way. And I don't know if that continues this weekend or not, but it's been a strange series, and it hasn't been all these blowouts either.
No.
It's been Mississippi State finding a way to win close ball games late in the games on Sundays, Saturdays, whatever. That's kind of been the difference. And, I don't know how to explain it really.
Yeah, because I always told people, like, Jacob Gonzalez is from Glendora, California. He didn't care what State did against Ole Miss in 2016. Like, that's completely outside his purview. But for whatever reason, that's where we are. And look, in Oxford, I think this happens with Ole Miss fans a lot. I mean, maybe they're going to fight me on this. I think they get nervous. Like, you know what I mean? I think the stadiums can get nervous sometimes when those losing streaks come and whatnot. I mean, I think it happened at Dudy Noble in, 05, 07, whatever years those were when it went the other way. And Bianca was kind of rolling a little bit on the series in Starkville, and it went in that direction. But I don't know, Ole Miss desperately needing something good to happen this weekend to try to salvage the thing at all. Again, 3-9 in the SEC at this moment, coming off those 2 sweeps. They've lost 8 of their last 9 outside of 1 win at Knoxville a few weeks ago in that one. Let's transition for a minute. What's a good season for Jeff Lebby this year?
I think most people would sign up for 6-6 right now.
Okay.
And when you think about the schedule and you think about what a disaster last year was and kind of the dynamics that they've had the last 3 years with going from the air raid offense to whatever last year was, you lose your head coach, you got a defensive coordinator that got promoted, and the whole situation in that office was just crazy. I didn't think that And it's, it's not really, it is Zach Arnett's fault because he was the head coach. But at the same time, he's asked to do an impossible task.
Sure.
To come in as a first-time head coach in the SEC, taking over for a legend, and he's completely revamped the offense. He didn't really know what to do from a organizational standpoint with his office, and he's taking a lot of advice from a lot of people. It was just a disaster, in and out. I mean, it was a bad situation, and Jeff Lebby has had to come in and clean up a lot of that mess and make this a more uniformed society there in the offices. So it's going to take some time, and I think the defense is kind of a mess right now. There wasn't a whole lot of a plan for recruiting and getting players in here that was going to help them right away. And that falls on this staff too. I didn't think they did a great job in the portal in the winter and trying to get some guys in here that's going to help them right away. But I think that things are starting to really kind of come together for them as far as just getting organized again. And for that, I think you look at the schedule, first year adding Texas and Oklahoma, and you got Texas on the schedule. You move out, the Alabamas and the LSUs of the world, but you still have good teams coming in here and playing. So the schedule to me says 6 wins would be a good season. 7 would be really good for Jeff Lebby. And we'll see from there. If they can get to a bowl game, I think fans will be extremely happy about the direction of the program.
Yeah, you're saying a year and a half ago you would have anticipated Mississippi State paying Zach Arnett to coach at Ole Miss. That wouldn't be where you're.
Was not expecting that. Was not expecting that at all, especially while Zach Arnett lives in Oktibbeha County right now.
Yeah.
With his chickens and cows and tractors. I never anticipated Zach Arnett wearing the powder blue.
Yeah. No, it's been one of the more bizarre things that has happened over the last few months. This era that we're in, NIL, all this stuff. I mean, Ole Miss was trying to figure out what they could pay in basketball to players and coaches, and trying to fend off Arkansas for Chris Beard and all that. And obviously, in every way possible, they're trying to maximize the 2024 football season under Lane Kiffin, and what is, at least on paper, something that is a likelihood going into the year. Where does State sort of balance NIL? Because Ole Miss and State are the same as in baseball matters. You've got to make sure that's taken care of, and in general. And you see what Arkansas is doing right here when they hire Calipari. They're almost kind of punting football a little bit, or at least they are right now with Sam Pittman and him not having any high-level Q rating to be able to generate that kind of stuff. What's sort of the perfect mix for State in this pretty screwed up, stupid era that we're in?
They're trying to balance it all out and be competitive in everything. And I mean, as you know, like, it's in the state of Mississippi, it's always going to be tougher to fundraise money like that and do it in a competitive way. I think that State has decided to invest more money in basketball and in football than they have in the past, whether that's been, as far as the organization, as far as the university investing in it and the fan base. I think we're seeing more money go to those sports, those revenue sports, than we have in the past. So there's been a more of an emphasis to invest more in football, and Zach Selman's put a lot of emphasis in investing in football from a university standpoint. So they are putting more money into it and trying to hire more support staff and trying to put more in the recruiting budget and things like that. And then, from an NIL perspective, Charlie Winfield's done a great job with the Bulldog Initiative and doing something that nobody else would do here. And that's been good for them. But there's still a long way to go. I mean, I would say Mississippi State's probably looking up at a lot of the league from an NIL perspective. I don't think that they're poor by any means, but when you look at what everybody else is doing, and especially the top half of the league, what they're investing in NIL, there's a lot of room for Mississippi State to grow. But I think that basketball really has seen tremendous growth in it from a fundraising standpoint, and the same thing for football too. I think Mississippi State can afford to get some good talent out there, but there's still so much room to grow. I mean, baseball, they're always going to be competitive there. I don't think they're ever going to be hurting there. There's people that are going to invest in baseball only. And that's probably going to be the same thing for Ole Miss. But basketball and football definitely needed to be addressed. And I feel like they've done a good job of that.
Was there any state concern from those reports regarding Jans the other day, or was that smokescreen only from the Arkansas side?
I think there was. To me, my opinion on it, and nobody asked my opinion, but I think Cal was kind of the guy. And I think there were some other guys that I think Beard was definitely in the mix and probably right there. I don't know how serious Arkansas was with Chris Jans. And I don't think he even interviewed for the job. And most of that is based around the fact that I don't think that they were looking for that style of coach and what Chris Jans does. He's not a guy that's going to bring a lot of excitement to a place like Arkansas. At Mississippi State, he is a great fit from a cultural standpoint and what he likes to do, how tough the players play. Mississippi State's a very blue-collar type environment. The fans love when teams play tough, love when they play defense. He's a great fit at Mississippi State. Arkansas fans were crapping all over the idea that Chris Jans was going to be their head coach. Yeah. They did not want that. And several places that have said Chris Jans is a candidate for the job have done the same thing. He is a very polarizing coach for people. I think at Mississippi State, they love the idea of Chris Jans. They love that style of play, but not everybody likes that. When they look at Chris Jans' teams, they see, 30% shooting from three-point range, games that end 60 to 55. That's not for everybody. And I think that's what he's dealing with. But he really has got to come out and do what some of these other coaches like Nate Oats and Chris Beard have done and talk about his commitment to Mississippi State and how excited he is to be the coach, because this fan base right now is starting to pull further and further away from the idea of Chris Jans because of the idea that he is going out there and seeking jobs, interviewing for jobs reportedly, and looking for a way out. I think that this has been a damaging last couple of weeks for Chris Jans and Mississippi State. And there is an offer on the table for over $4 million, which I think is totally fair for a coach that hasn't gotten past the first round of the NCAA tournament yet. He's been to 2 NCAA tournaments, which is great. He's doing a great job at State. But at what point do you draw a line in the sand and say, we're not going to give you ridiculous money that you haven't earned yet, So I think that's the dynamic right now is, does Chris Jans want to be here or not? And the fan base is kind of seeing through it. He hasn't addressed it at this point, and I don't know if he will because it's not really his personality. But I think he needs to continue to get the ball rolling for Mississippi State, because he asked for more money for NIL. He asked for more support from the fan base. They gave him both, and he's getting what he wants. So there's not a whole lot more he can ask from Mississippi State at this standpoint. And I think the fans are ready for him to come out and say, I'm happy to be here, and let's move forward.
And to win an NCAA tournament game. Like, is that the ultimate? Just get to that next level.
This team has not won an NCAA tournament game since 2008.
Okay.
And it was a problem for Rick Stansbury. He had some really good teams that couldn't get past the second round. He won a game in the tournament a few times, but getting to the Sweet 16 was a major chore. And he lost to teams that were, below him. And now it's just trying to find, the next step is, can you get to the tournament and win a game? Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the challenge. This year it was, can you comfortably get in the NCAA tournament because you were on the bubble last year? Now it's, okay, it's time to win a game and move forward in the tournament.
How do you rate Zach Selman to this point?
I think he's been good. I think it's still
crazy early.
It's still early. He just made his first real, hire, I guess, in a big major sport. And we don't know what Jeff Lebby's going to do. I like Jeff Lebby a lot. I think that he's a very organized coach.
Yep.
From what I've seen so far, the program perspective, it looks nice. It looks pretty, but we don't know how that translates to the field yet. So we'll hold that judgment for later on the Zach Selman hire. But from a fundraising perspective, from a marketing perspective, he changed the logo that people were clamoring for almost immediately.
Yeah.
He kind of has that business sense about him, and he's good at the marketing aspect of everything. He's been good. I don't have any complaints about him to this point, and I don't think anybody does. I don't think you. I mean, if you're complaining, you're just making something up, because we don't have enough out there right now to complain about.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's kind of in rebuilding mode in a lot of ways. There were a lot of things that had to be cleaned up, and there's some things from the stadium standpoint that has to be kind of cleared up and fixed, but that's going to take time. So far, so good. I think I don't really know where this ends, but I have no complaints at this point with him.
Yeah, I've enjoyed kind of picking on whatever, but I will say that state script logo is pretty damn nice. Like, it's pretty good. It's nice.
Brian Haydad and I are taking credit for that, by the way.
Okay, that's fine.
We started a whole campaign last year about how the banners had got to be kicked to the curb. It's time to switch to the state script. It's time to market state, and Mississippi State just needs to be state. And that, if you listen to Jeff Lebby talk, he doesn't say anything other than state. And I think that's where they're kind of transitioning, is this is state.
Really?
And everybody in the SEC knows that it's state. Why do you care about what someone in Nebraska thinks about Mississippi State? I mean, people bring that up to me all the time. Well, it's not a national brand. Well, neither was the banner M.
Yeah.
At least if you're not gonna be known nationwide, at least look good,
I'm telling you, Robbie, I think, as I'm thinking through this and you're saying this, if you just we always use Dubuque, Iowa, is where our weird guy's from that just watches sports and is affiliated with the team. We say he's from Dubuque. And I think if you gave that guy a maroon state script, he would be more likely to say Mississippi State than that banner M. I think that banner M would almost look more Missouri State or Montana State, or who the hell knows.
Yeah.
There's something to that. Because you have multiple scripts, because you have the M over the S on baseball. You've got the MSU interlocking in some capacity, or at least you did, like whatever. Like that M banner was not primary enough for that to really ingrain in anybody nationally.
Yeah. And we started blowing that up last year.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually got pulled aside at the Alabama game in Tuscaloosa last year. And we're told, you guys have got to stop. You guys have got to stop talking about this. We're not changing it. We're trying to brand this banner M, and you guys are making our lives very difficult, and it's not going to change. And it was like 2 weeks later, there was a state script on the helmet.
Oh, really? Okay.
And the next year, some of those people that were telling us we got to stop had moved on to Auburn. We're out of here. And Zach Selman moved in and started taking the banner M down immediately. And I don't know if Zach did not consult us about this. And we talked to some people in his circle about it. He did not consult us about the state script.
All right.
But we're still going to take credit for it.
Look, it looks better on the helmet. It looks better on the uniforms. It's from the 70s. Again, I know I give people crap on Twitter. It was State's thing a long time ago.
Here, one thing I'll say about it.
Yeah.
I like it better than the banner M on the helmet. I would much rather have the interlocking on the helmet.
I don't mind that. Yeah. I think making that on all your cap/helmet would be something that made sense to me.
I think the interlocking should be your football logo.
Okay.
I think the M over S should be your baseball logo, and I think state script should be everything else. Basketball, softball, whatever. And you can use it as your primary in football too, but I like the interlocking on the helmet. But I don't know if that's going to happen.
You wouldn't like the M over the S on the helmet? That's got to be baseball only?
Yeah, that's baseball only.
Okay, all right.
There's a lot of people that get upset about that they think it's the best logo Mississippi State has, and they think it should be on football, everything else. I think it should stay with baseball. It's baseball's logo. they should keep it.
I frustrate people because I like the M in the Ole Miss script that they've started using a good bit over the last couple of years. And I want them to replace the block M on the baseball cap with that, because to me, that block M, it's not even the same width that the Ole Miss block M was back in the 60s and 70s. And then two, if you just see a block M, Michigan, Maryland, like there's no Ole Miss to a block M outside of a baseball circle that would understand that's their baseball cap. So there's something to taking the M from the Ole Miss script and using that in that way. I mean, I know a lot of people say, and I don't mean like they say it looks better on women's uniforms sometimes because, like, again, a font is not feminine, but you know what I mean. Like,
right.
But in a lot of ways, I think, I mean, I would like for them to, I've told Tower Jordan, the Realtree people, this. I'd like for them to take the Realtree helmet this year and throw that script M on there and just let everybody burn down all the way through. It's a new helmet, it's a new script, the whole deal. But no, I'm with you.
Ole Miss has infinitely more things to work with because the color scheme is so elite.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's going to hurt a lot of state people's feelings if they're listening to this. But I look good in powder blue, man.
Okay.
I look really good in powder blue. And every now and then I'll wear it. Somebody will say, "Oh, that's Ole Miss," and I'm like, "Well, I mean, I can't help. God made me look good in this color."
Hey, Robbie, I've got a pair of Blue Delta jeans they put me in a few years ago that are cream with a maroon stitching, and there's not very often I can wear those, but I do have them.
There you go.
It was Egg Bowl week a few years ago, and they were putting us in different pants for different things, and they are cream with maroon stitching over in my closet somewhere. But no, look, you're making a good point though all the way around. That state script, and I think it's why I like it. It looks better than every other logo you guys have on pullovers and polos and on clothes. It really does.
Yes.
Like it pops on clothes.
It's the best for like the apparel side of things.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at your helmet back there, and I cannot like. It makes me laugh every time seeing Ole Miss get into the camo game. Because I remember in 2015, I think it was 15, might have been 16. State wore camo baseball uniforms, Mossy Oak.
Yeah, sure.
And Ole Miss people were just destroying it online. Bunch of rednecks. And here we are. We have camo wars now. Realtree versus Mossy Oak.
It is one of the weirder things, though, that two of the largest manufacturers of camo, or at least licensing in the country, are Ole Miss and State people. Like, it's one of the odder things that we have going in college athletics right now.
It is. But I think camo is becoming kind of cool.
Yeah, sure.
And I like it. I like what Ole Miss is doing with their camo stuff, and State too. State's starting to put a lot of camo out. We have a partnership with Maroon and Company on Thunder and Lightning, and they've got the Mossy Oak stuff, and they're putting logos all over that stuff, and it's selling like hotcakes. It's crazy.
How involved is Mossy Oak with State?
Lightly. They don't want to. I think they want to remain kind of neutral. They're very, they're worldwide. I mean, they're big. They're a big deal, and they don't want to ostracize themselves to just Mississippi State. I think.
Sure.
But the apparel companies, they have access to Mossy Oak, I guess is how it works. I don't know how all that works completely, but you can get the Mossy Oak and put whatever you want to on it. Like you have the pattern or whatever. But, I think they are involved. They're a partial sponsor or sponsor Bulldog Initiative, I think. And they're not nearly as involved, I think, as Realtree is with Ole Miss.
What do you put you on the spot? What are you anticipating this weekend?
I think that it's going to be a competitive series. I don't think it's going to be a blowout by any means, because no matter what these teams have been on either side of the coin, it's been almost every year a really competitive series. And you look back, even the last 2 years, those, Ole Miss didn't have a great season in 2022. I mean, when State went up there and beat them in 2022, it was kind of like whoever wins the series is going to be going in the opposite direction. It dropped
Ole Miss to 6-12 in the SEC at the time.
Yeah. So to me, you can throw out the records and everybody gets tired of that, but you literally can. I think it's going to be a competitive series. I think State right now is a little more steady on the mound, and they've been probably more steady defensively, and at the plate they'll battle a little bit. I think at Ole Miss, playing there, Ole Miss is going to be charged up with the atmosphere, so you can make up a couple of runs probably there. So I don't know. I'll probably pick State to win the series just because they've won every year since 16, and until they lose, there's no reason to pick against them.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's going to be competitive all 3 games.
Yeah, I think State gets 2. It's kind of where I'm leaning right now. We're recording on Wednesday morning, this later on Thursday night. For the good people out there, you and Hey Dad, good people running Thunder and Lightning. How often is that podcast, and where can anybody find that at, Robbie?
We actually have a ton of Ole Miss listeners. You'd be shocked.
Hey, look, we sell cars to State people through Clark Ford all the time. I get it.
You have a lot of State people. There's people that talk about what y'all talk about all the time. We do it Monday through Friday. Every week, unless Hey Dad decides to take a vacation, which is at this point every other week. You can listen to that wherever you get podcasts. Go to Super Talk FM and listen to it there. But we like to entertain the masses, and we like to be obviously Hey Dad and myself both grew up Mississippi State people. Everybody knows where our allegiances lie, but one of the things that we've done that people know us by is we will tell it like it is, good or bad. With Mississippi State, Ole Miss, we're going to tell you exactly what we think. And it turns some people off and some people like it. So if you're an Ole Miss fan, just because we're a Mississippi State podcast, don't let that scare you.
Yeah. So Super Talk FM for that, Thunder and Lightning. Robbie, appreciate it as always. Let's do it again.
Yeah, man. I'll see you this weekend.
That was Robbie Faulk on 3, visiting with Chase Parham here on Hand Raised. Guys, appreciate Robbie's time very much. Ole Miss, Mississippi State, starting on Friday evening. I'm going to get the times wrong. 7, 7:30, and then 1:30, I think. Almost positive that's right. 7 on Friday, 7:30 on Saturday, 1:30 on Sunday afternoon. If you're coming up this weekend for the series for the Grove Bowl games, check out the College Corner. It's at the Oxford Commons right off of Sisk. If you tip, you win. The Grove Collective football signed by Lane Kiffin is up for grabs. You're automatically entered to win the Grove Collective football signed by Lane Kiffin when you make a purchase at the College Corner and leave a tip. All tips made go directly to the Grove Collective to benefit Ole Miss athletics. The promotion ends on May the 15th. The winner will be randomly selected and notified via phone or email, whichever you leave at checkout. Again, that's at the College Corner, right off of Sisk Avenue in the Oxford Commons as you head towards Oxford High School, getting off of Highway 7. I told you I'd get you a Masters leaderboard update. I don't know any of these people. Let's see. You gotta give me the leaderboard where I can get an update. Just asking for a leaderboard. All right, Shipley is 1 under through 15. Scott is 1 under. I don't know who these people are. 1 under through 10. Tiger Woods, halfway home. He's 1 under through 9. Let's see. I'm looking for some other names. Sergio Garcia, even par. Xander Schauffele, even par. Phil Mickelson, 1 over. He's done for the day. John Rahm, 1 over, done for the day. Bunch of guys, 2 over, 3 over. I suck at golf coverage. Let's see. Hold on. Oh, I found a leaderboard. Here we go. DeChambeau, is it Bryson DeChambeau? He's 7 under, done for the day. He has a 1-shot lead over Scotty Scheffler, who is 6 under today at Augusta. Willett, I don't know who that is 4 under. Hogard is 4 under through 12. Homa, Homa, he's 4 under through 9. Fox is 3 under, done for the day. Davis, 3 under through 16. Looking for my guy, Aberg. Look at my guy, Aberg, 2 under through 8. He's on the 9th hole. Having himself a day. in Augusta. That pretty much catches you up. I feel like I would be much better off just doing the Chris Vernon thing, where I stand up and sing and get people behind me, and that'd be a lot more fun than what I do here, because I have absolutely no idea who these people are. It's a beautiful course, though. I'm watching. I'll give you my view. What I'm watching, I've got the Masters on one screen, making Chase proud. Got Phillies, Pirates on the other. There in the second inning there in Philadelphia. The Phillies wearing the old school throwback powder blue with sort of the dark red, almost maroon color. Fantastic uniform. Phillies should go undefeated when they wear this uniform. Pittsburgh has sneaky good uniforms too. They were having uniform conversations. Those are sneaky good uniforms as well. All right. The other big news today, we'll talk about this maybe on the other side when I take some calls. O.J. Simpson dies today at the age of 76, according to his family, after a bout with cancer. Watching the reaction both ways to O.J. Simpson's death today has been fascinating. I won't say it's encouraging. It's sort of validating of what I think, which is we've gotten to a place in our country where everything is so divided that we literally fight over everything. And the line of delineation on how O.J. Simpson's life is viewed and how his death was reported was kind of fascinating, actually. We might talk about that. We might talk about some other things. Like I said, NBA, big night in the NBA, a whole lot going on. Also a big day in basketball. So remember, when you listen to this interview here in a minute with Blake Lovell, that we taped this around 10 o'clock this morning. At the time, Scott Drew had not given Kentucky an answer. He subsequently has. He has told Kentucky that no, he does not want the job in Lexington. He's going to stay in Waco and stay with Baylor. Along those lines, Danny Hurley has rejected an overture from Kentucky as well. He is going to stay in stores there at UConn, go for a third straight championship. So a lot of talk about Billy Donovan at this hour. Billy Donovan, the head coach of the Chicago Bulls. Of course, he led Florida to back-to-back titles ages ago. He coached the Oklahoma City Thunder. Then he went to Chicago. He's now with the Bulls. A lot of people believe Billy Donovan, this is the one job in all of college basketball that he might return for. But Billy's been out of the game for a while. Recruiting has changed quite a bit since he left. He's a great coach, but there's no guarantees that Billy Donovan just walks into Kentucky, takes over in a new era of college sports, and just hits a home run. There's some Bruce Pearl talk, and then, quite frankly, there's some, like, chance this thing gets weird at Kentucky, and everybody's beginning to acknowledge it. So we'll come back. We'll talk about that after this interview with Blake Lovell. A lot of SEC basketball talk here. What happened with Chris Beard staying at Ole Miss, John Calipari, now the head coach at Arkansas. We talk about Auburn, Tennessee, and more here on this interview. Taped earlier today, Blake Lovell of Southeastern14.com on the Campbell Clinic Hotline. Enjoy. Blake Lovell does an incredible job covering SEC basketball and other things, but SEC basketball in particular for Southeastern14.com. The season is over, Blake, and I'm sure you're ready for a break, but there's some jobs that have to get filled first before you can completely tie a nice bow on things. Arkansas did its part earlier this week with hiring John Calipari. We'll talk about that. Now we wait on Kentucky. The bluest of blue blood jobs, as John Calipari said in his goodbye video for Kentucky fans. I guess it's Scott Drew's job.
Yeah, it seems like it. I think that seems to be the most confidence I would have in a candidate right now. Now, look, if he were to say no, then who knows where things go from there, because I think that's the clear target at this point. And, and it makes a lot of sense because clearly they want to. It's just a restart for Kentucky. Like this, as I said, I think Cal going to Arkansas was best for both parties. I think everyone wins in that scenario. Now for Kentucky, it's really just a matter of you've got to bring in someone who can at least do what John Calipari did to an extent in terms of building the same kind of talented teams year after year, having a chance to have a lot of regular season success. But obviously, it's all about the tournament success too. And You're talking about someone at Scott Drew who took over a complete dumpster fire, as we know, at Baylor many years ago, and has just consistently had success. And of course, that's included postseason success with a championship and all of that. And so I think it makes a lot of sense because I've always said, and you probably agree with this, Neal, there are maybe 1% of coaches in the world that coach basketball that could coach at Kentucky and be successful because of not just the coaching, the basketball aspect on the floor, but it's everything that comes with it off the floor. And I feel like Scott Drew's someone I always forget. He's only 53. Feels like he's older than that because he's been coaching forever. Um, but I think he's probably about that range of guy that's fine handling media stuff. He's fine with all the other stuff like that. It's going to be completely different than Baylor, but he just strikes me as the kind of guy who'd be okay with dealing with that kind of stuff and promoting the program the way it needs to be promoted and all that. So I think it'd be a great hire if that's who it winds up with. But like I said, if it's not him, then I don't know who they go to after that.
Yeah. So for those of you who are watching this on Thursday evening, in case things have broken over the course of the day, we're taping this at 9:22 a.m. Central Daylight Time. So there's a chance that by the time you hear this, some of this is a little outdated. So I'll kind of go big picture here. Let's talk about Scott Drew some. He's 53. He's my age. I get it. I get the whole. At my age, I think you start going. Maybe I have one more chapter in me. Could do something different. I've been successful. I could do something completely different and make it work. And then there's the voice in the back of your head that goes, why mess with it? I mean, you've figured this out. You're comfortable. There's no pressure on you. You go to a new place, there's pressure. You start a new job, there's pressure. If you stick with what you've got, you can kind of even take your foot off the gas a little bit. He's won a title. No one's going to take it away from him. He's turned Baylor into a perennial power. He's beloved there. I mean, there's got to be a little voice in the back of his mind, or maybe in his family's mind, that goes, we could just keep doing this. We're making a ton of money. I could hang out with Chip and Joanna and build a house here and there, and I don't know, maybe renovate something, write a book, fade into the sunset, nice and comfortable. No one at Baylor is going to say anything if he runs over vacation days, for example. You know what I mean? I mean, yeah. There's a little part of you that wonders, like, yeah, I get it, the allure of Kentucky, but there also has to be the pull of Baylor.
Yeah, I agree, because like it always comes down to like certain things motivate certain guys, and it's just a matter of what motivates Scott Drew. Just like, it was the same with the other candidates that have already been discussed. It's like what motivated a Nate Oats or someone like that if he was going to make a move. And my thing was, well, why would Nate Oats make a move now? He just got Alabama to the Final Four. He could coach there for the next decade, and just getting them to that Final Four, that was good enough for right now. That will serve him well for another decade. And I think it's like, why go to Kentucky and take all that pressure now to where Scott Drew could be the Baylor coach for the rest of his entire coaching career if he wanted to. I truly believe that. And I don't think there's any doubt, right?
Easy.
So
I mean, it would take 5 straight losing seasons before he would even put the pressure on him.
Yeah. And so I think it's that simple. Like, it is very much a matter of, are you motivated by the challenge of going to Kentucky and experiencing, like I said, everything that comes along with the Kentucky job? Are you just someone who wants to just say, hey, at least I went and I experienced that, whatever that is most appealing to you? I wanted to give it a shot. And perhaps that is the allure of if it does happen, then that's what he could say. Hey, I just felt like this was a time. I've been here at Baylor for the longest time now. I won a national championship. Let's go see, like you said, is there one more kind of run where let's go see if we can do it here in a much different environment, much different situation, probably in terms of resources and that kind of stuff. And so let's just see. But I mean, there's always more to it. And I think that's where it comes down to the pressure aspect of, you go from this situation at Baylor where you have won a championship, you don't have any pressure on you, to now going to Kentucky where, let's not kid ourselves, the immediate expectation as soon as next March is that you get at least to the Sweet 16 or beyond. Like that is, if you get to the first round or the second round, there may be more fans that may say, all right, we'll give him as kind of this is the year, first year, we'll give him a little bit of a pass. But there are probably still a very decent percentage of fans that are going to say, here we go again. And fair or unfair, that's the reaction. And so, do you want to take that on? And again, some coaches will take that challenge and say, absolutely. And that's why, when people were having the Dan Hurley conversation, I'm like, Dan Hurley is the kind of guy who would go out and say, I just won back-to-back national championships at UConn. I'm about to go tell all you guys, I'm going to go win back-to-back at Kentucky. Like
Yeah.
he seems like that kind of guy, right? But I don't know if that's Scott Drew. I don't know if that's other candidates that they maybe have on their list. So it's interesting to kind of see what dynamic wins out here, because it's about what motivates certain coaches, and we'll see if that's the case for him. So,
Well, to me, there's a lot of interesting things in the final year of John Calipari and the way he left and the fact that he left and some of the reporting. The story that I found the most interesting was written on Wednesday. It's Kyle Tucker and Shams Charania, two very good reporters. No one's better at covering Kentucky than Kyle Tucker. And really, there are a few people who have more national basketball contacts than Shams. And they combined to write the story for The Athletic. And in it, it talked about how one of the things that Calipari was most frustrated with at Kentucky was having to sort of go out and drum up his own NIL, his own money to get to players. And I read that and went, because I'm really interested in this whole NIL player salary thing, how sustainable it is when you're asking fans to pay for players year over year. There's a lot there that I've dove into it for hours at a time before, so I won't make you do it. But I thought it was interesting that one of the things that he said was, Calipari, is that Arkansas basically, at least for this moment in time, and I think that's an important phrase, in this moment in time said, no, we'll have that for you. You just come get who you need. And at Kentucky, it was still, even in the midst of all this, you've got to drum it up. So if you're Scott Drew, I don't know who's next on the list. I mean, Danny Hurley is already gone. Nate Oats isn't leaving Tuscaloosa. I don't know who's next on the list, but the first question he would have to have is, all right, I can't believe I'm saying this at Kentucky, but I'm saying it at Kentucky, what's the NIL situation? What shape are you in? Because the story about Tucker and Shams indicated that at least in this moment in time, not over history, but today, Arkansas is in a better NIL condition than Kentucky is.
Yeah, that is very curious, because I didn't mean to, but like someone said something, it was a couple of days ago, and I just had to laugh, and they were like, was Cal going to get the resources at Arkansas that he got at Kentucky? I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, think about all the big names that surround Arkansas athletics and all the people that put money into it. I mean, Waltons, Tyson, Jerry Jones, like you could just go down the list and think of all the people who are willing to put money into everything at Arkansas to make sure they are successful basketball wise. I mean, just again, given what I think they want to accomplish. And so I feel like that is one where he's going to have no shortage of options. But it is interesting to look at the Kentucky side of things and say, all right, what do they do different for this guy that maybe they were not willing to do at the end of Calipari's run versus, of course, completely different start to his run because it had nothing to do with NIL and all this other stuff. And how significantly does that change now with a new candidate? Because you would think that if you are going to say yes to this job, knowing the pressure that comes along with it, you want to make sure that every single little thing is in place that you need to be successful. Because, like you said, if it is a situation for the new guy is coming in and saying, all right, now I am basically starting over. I've got to go out and figure out a way to get all this money pumped in. Well, that makes my job way, way harder. And it's already probably the most pressure packed job in the country now going into the next season, perhaps. And so, yeah, like that's why I am just, it may be just as simple, like you said. People may listen to this and it may be just as simple as saying, all right, Scott Drew took the job and everything's great and here we go. But it seems like it's a little more complicated than that. And we'll find out, I guess, based on what we hear about Kentucky's plans moving forward with NIL and resources and everything. But yeah, like Cal's going to be taken care of at Arkansas. I guess we'll find out exactly how taken care of the new guy is at Kentucky. So
Just won't spend a hell of a lot of time on this in case by the time this airs, Scott Drew's made a decision. But if it weren't Scott Drew, who might it even be?
yeah, I'll be honest. Like, I think at that point, I mean, I brought up Billy Donovan. I know he said what he said, but I'm like, the longer this could drag out, it's beneficial to him because the time would make more sense than if they had to hire him 4 or 5 days ago. Um, but even then, like we've heard the stuff about I think Donovan where he's coming back into a different college basketball landscape than he
100%.
thrived in, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's a change. I mean, it's a risk either way because again, it's not like the guy is probably staying in the NBA and feels like he's going to win an NBA championship every year or anything. But like there have been the ups and downs for sure in the NBA run, but it is completely stepping into a different world. And I wonder. I mean, I don't even know if I wonder about it. I feel pretty confident that he is thinking that to where, boy, I left and like I have this mystique of being the guy that won the back-to-back national championships in a completely different era. And do I come back? And what if I just come back and just completely bomb? And it's like that takes all that away. Now, like everyone's going to look back and say, well, it was Billy Donovan. He won the championships this many years ago, but he couldn't cut it in this era, especially in the pressure cooker that is Kentucky. And so, but to be honest, like beyond that, that's really the only name I look at. Again, if it's not Hurley, we know it's not Oates. And that's where like people have brought up like Mark Pope, but I'm like, I know he's a Kentucky guy, but I just don't know if that's the sell you can make to fill in and feel like this is going to be the guy that does better than John Calipari. The one name I'll say, I've not seen his name on any list other than probably the initial one after Cal left. And as I said earlier, it's the 1% of coaches out there that can handle the stuff that comes along with the basketball at Kentucky. I mean, it's Bruce Pearl because Bruce, I think, would be fine handling that kind of stuff. You want to talk about a guy that can go out and get money and, sell anything to anybody. Bruce could absolutely do it. We all know that. It's just also a matter of,
if I were Kentucky, he's who I would want.
Yeah, right. It makes a lot of sense. And I think I saw some people.
That's what you told me. Anyway,
based on the discussion, it was like age and all this, but I'm like, I don't know, man. I mean, Bruce is still doing pretty well. Like you can talk about age and all this and say maybe they want somebody who's a little bit younger. I just think he has the personality. He has the, magnetic pull of just being a guy that's going to be able to get recruits. We see it at Auburn. And so I said initially my top three, probably in whatever order, would be Oats, Pearl, and then I would say I said just take your third guy, like whether it is a Scott Drew, whether it's a Billy Donovan, whoever. But I felt like if you're Kentucky and you see what those two guys have achieved, those would have probably been two of the top three in Oats and Pearl. And so for me, Pearl would still be on that list. I don't know if he's on Kentucky's list, but I just think that he is in that 1% of coaches that could probably handle everything that comes along with being the Kentucky basketball coach.
Let's talk about John Calipari at Arkansas. Got introduced on a Wednesday night. Was able to deftly get off the stage before he had to do the call the hogs thing in front of everybody. Got off the stage, went and talked to Dave Van Horn and Sam Pittman and everybody. And now, effective today, he's got to put a roster together that might be completely from scratch. Let's assume for the sake of this conversation that the numbers that we're hearing are somewhat right. At least $5 million for NIL, maybe more than $7 million. A lot of money. He can put together a roster. If you're Cal today, are you trying to get as many of those 5-star guys that were committed to Kentucky to come with you, or are you doing the more of the transfer route? How are you putting that roster together, knowing what you know today about the state of college basketball?
I think you get the top tier guys that you had freshman wise from Kentucky, which we know we saw Quaintance had already, asked for his release and all that. And I don't think it would be a big stunner. I haven't looked at the predictions or anything on him, but I'm like, okay, you put 2 and 2 together, you could see it makes sense if that's what happens. But I think beyond just the top tier of freshmen, maybe not everyone, I think, as I've said many times here over the past week, I'm like, he had 2 upperclassmen he could rely on last year. That was Antonio Reeves and Trey Mitchell. And the problem became, well, Trey Mitchell got injured for a good stretch, right? And it didn't feel like maybe he was ever fully 100% when I think it was the back issue or whatever he had. So really, you're fully depending on one upperclassman last year to go along with all the great talented freshmen. But once again, you saw the results. Like, that's what happened. You had a couple freshmen that didn't play well in the NCAA tournament that had been great all season long. And what do you do? And so I think that number goes from 2 to at least 5, something like that. You got to go out to me and get at least 5 senior, grad transfer, whatever guys on the roster. Because I think otherwise you cannot just right now, at least until we get past, all these guys that have the extra year and all this other stuff, right? You have to have, to me, like, you have to be able to put together a roster where you're playing at least probably 3 upper type classmen guys at the same time, because that's where there's so little room for error the way they did last year. And it worked for certain stretches. It didn't work for other stretches, but that's where you get into those NCAA tournament games where you have guys who have played a lot of college basketball. They've been in that setting before. And that's where I think it's very important, really. Maybe not even just go out and find old guys. Go out and find guys who have played in the tournament. Like, go out and get, even if it's the 5th man or 6th man from wherever, pick a team that played as a 10 seed in the NCAA tournament. Go get that guy, because that experience, he learned something from that. And he's been there before. And I think that has just kind of continually been the problem, is that they've not had enough of those guys who have been there before. And I know people still push back and they're like, well, they won it with this crew and all this back and this. And I'm like, but as we just said, it's a different era. Like, this is not the same landscape that he won that in. And so you have to adapt to the times. And I think, fair or unfair, I feel like that's always been a fair criticism of John Calipari, is that his ability to adapt. I thought last year, like, offensively, he started to adapt. It looked like he was much more into the way you have to play offense now in this era to be successful.
Shot
Helps
a
having
lot
good
more
players,
threes. Yeah, played it at a
right?
faster tempo.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like, they didn't just bog it down to where one guy's dribbling and 4 guys are standing. Like, they were way more open to that. And so I think you have to go out, find experienced transfers. Again, maybe not everybody has NCAA tournament experience, but go get a couple guys who've been in the tournament before, because they'll be willing for that kind of money to come play at Arkansas. Go find those guys. There are guys out there right now. There's probably 100 of them of the 2,000 that are out there that have played in the tournament before, whatever the number is. I don't know, but go do that. And then I think it's also like, he has to rebuild his teams on the identity that did work for him. And that's just, go find just some defensive juggernauts, just guys that can go out and defend. It doesn't have to be all 5 guys on the floor at the same time, but just go out and find guys who, yes, need to be able to block shots like his team did last year, but you got to have stoppers. And if he can just find a way to combine that all together, and this is where, honestly, Neal, like, I am intrigued, because what if we do get the rejuvenated John Calipari, who's out to basically throw the middle finger up to Kentucky and say, I told you, I still had this in me. Like, that's what I'm most interested to see, because if that's the case, he will go win there, and he'll probably go to multiple Final Fours, maybe win a national championship at some point. That's what I want to see from him. If he does all those things, which is easier said than done, I don't know that it's going to be that hard to compile a roster that can win now, but he's just got to remember, I think, the era that he's playing in. So,
were you surprised Chris Beard said no to Arkansas?
A little bit, but I think too, it's timing. And I'm like, if Chris Beard had been at Ole Miss for 2 years, I think he said yes. But it is just a weird thing to where, and I know, like, we've seen coaches jump from one job to another 1 year after and all this, but I don't know. Like, this was one where I was thinking, I was probably more like 50-50, whereas I think a lot of people were 95-5 that he was going. And I just kept thinking, man, it's you. And that's this whole discussion, right? We said this with Scott Drew. It's like, you don't have to be successful going to Kentucky. You don't have to go to Kentucky to be able to win. You can win at Baylor. Like, it's like Chris Beard can win at Ole Miss. He doesn't have to go to Arkansas, right? And so I think that's where sometimes we get so stuck on. Sure, we love to rank jobs based on like their historical significance and accomplishments and the tradition and everything. But like you mentioned a minute ago, it's like if Arkansas is in a situation where they're feel better NIL wise than Kentucky does, then at least as of this moment, that makes Arkansas feel like a better job to a certain extent. And so I think that's where, and I mean, as well as anybody, it's just Ole Miss, what they put into it is clearly enough that is going to satisfy Chris Beard to the point to where he thought this still gives him a great chance to be successful at Ole Miss. And if he didn't think that, he would have been the next coach at Arkansas. And so surprised maybe a little bit, but I always try to say, should anything surprise me in this era where it's like, I don't feel like you have to hop to every job just to be successful because you can
100%.
find ways anywhere to get the job done. And I think he probably has realized that after a successful start there in year one, even though they didn't make the tournament, but they certainly exceeded expectations for the most part.
So if he's looking around and he looks over to his east a little bit and he looks at Nate Oats in Alabama and the job that Nate has done there, which is incredible. I mean, Alabama's had some basketball. I covered an Alabama team that went to the Elite Eight. They've had some success in the past, but not tons of it, not consistently. The first Final Four ever. And what lessons, if you're another coach, can you take from what Nate Oats did to build this particular team that frankly went to the Final Four, and had they run into anyone else that night, probably play for the title, but Connecticut's playing on a completely different level right now than everyone else. Alabama gave them as good a game as anybody's given them in 2 years in the tournament, but it just wasn't enough. What lessons can you take from what Nate Oats did?
You got to be able to score points. And it's so funny. Like we had the stat, and I don't remember exactly what it was, but before last season, before Miami got there to the Final Four, of course, it was a wild Final Four last year, and I don't think there was any team like in Ken Palm that was rated 100 or lower defensively that had ever made the Final Four or something like that. Some wild stat similar to that. And now it's like back to back years. You have two teams that did that in Miami and Alabama. And why? Because they were just so much better at times than anybody out there offensively. And I know it sounds like simple, but I really do think when you look at it, and this was maybe a bad example this year because you got two dominant big men starring in the national championship, but it's like it is still, to me, it's a guards game these days. And I think we talked about, like, look at how Cal has evolved offensively last year. If he keeps that going, they will be successful. Like, look at the way Alabama's kind of been built. Like, sure, they had guys last year like Clowney and Bediako and guys like that that played really well and were really good supporting type guys, but it was still driven by a Brandon Miller who, you know, played like a guard. You can say, okay, he's a forward or whatever, but played like a guard. And of course, you had the guards around him and everything that Sears could do, and Quinterly and everybody else that played a significant role in that team last year. And so you fast forward this year, I think it's the ability to have so many guys on the floor. And this is just, this is a basketball thing. And you're like, okay, well, what can Chris Beard do? But I think the ability just to have so many guys who can extend defenses and step out and be able to knock down shots, too, it's like the NBA aspect to where all the NBA teams now, they want the big guys to be able to step out and make shots. Like, they can't just survive on being the back to the basket, post up, dribble, 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 poke shot. Like that, we're just not there anymore.
Yeah,
And
you see
so,
it with
not to
Denver,
say,
Denver with Jokic and some of the young teams that are coming
right.
up. I mean, Wembanyama with San Antonio plays.
Yep.
He plays, outside a lot. It's one of the things that makes him
Yep.
unguardable. Chet Holmgren with Oklahoma City, same thing. You can't. Those guys don't just go post up on the block. They do other things.
Yeah. And I think that's just how you have to build your teams now. And of course, this team was completely different for Chris Beard because you felt like you
Okay.
knew at the
I
start
found this
it
on the
was
web for Hey
going to be
Siri.
a situation where he has to kind of you're picking up the pieces. As soon as you take over the job, you're like, okay, how can I best build this roster for this season? And then let's just get one for this year, try to make the most of it, and then let's really start to look to the future and figure out how we're going to do it moving forward after this. And so I think that's always been kind of the deceiving thing. He's had some good offenses, and it's just that his defenses have just been so fantastic, in all those years at Texas Tech and such, and even at Texas, that for that small run. But I think that's it. It's just continuing to see how are certain teams having success, especially in the SEC, and it really has been look at what an Alabama has done and kind of just the playing style. Of course, they don't have to, they're never going to play exactly like Alabama. But I think if you look at it just from a philosophical standpoint, you're seeing certain things that are carrying over year to year in this era right now. And I think just continuing to figure out ways to adapt to that, that's really all you have to do. Because you know that they're not going to be the 100 and whatever something ranked defense in the country like they were this year. That's going to get better because that's just what his teams do. So if they can just continue to find those pieces offensively, build around, the guard play, but not even just the guard play, just building a roster where everybody on the floor can step out and make shots, or at least 4 of the 5, you're going to give yourselves a lot of success, I think, in this particular chance for success in this era, just based on how we're seeing teams play now. So,
all right, a couple of big picture things before I let you go, and I really appreciate your time. Big picture thing number one, we do this after every tournament. We look at how the league did, how a league did. Alabama made the Final Four. I think Tennessee should have. I thought Tennessee got robbed from an officiating standpoint against Purdue. But regardless, Tennessee goes Elite Eight. And then the rest of the league, it was kind of a disappointment, right? I mean, Auburn got bounced early, and Florida had an injury at the SEC tournament championship, and they got bounced early. And Texas A&M almost pulled it off against Houston, almost got it done. But as a whole, the league didn't make a lot of runs, if you will. What did you, if anything, did you read into the league's performance in the tournament?
Yeah, it was disappointing, I think, until of course you had the run that Alabama and Tennessee made. And to be honest, I probably would have said, hey, if the SEC gets half those teams in the Sweet 16, that's a major success. If you add Kentucky and add Auburn to the Alabama and Tennessee group, sure. Like at that point, we're probably thinking, okay, this was great. But the fact is, Auburn was the most disappointing, losing that game against Yale, and Kentucky probably, I say second most disappointing because, of course, if anyone listened to our stuff, we were terrified for Kentucky in that game against Oakland just because it was a bad matchup. And we always say that with the tournament, it's all about the matchups. It felt like the SEC got some pretty rough draws, even as the higher seed in some of these games. And so we always sometimes just have to throw the seeding out and say, okay, South Carolina's a 6. Didn't feel like as good of a team as Oregon was at that time as the 11. And so I think it was one of those kind of tournaments for the SEC where, the matchups and the seeding mattered, and it wasn't necessarily in their favor in some of those. But, overall, I still think you're seeing what Florida can become under Todd Golden. And, they were kind of the Alabama, Kentucky, I don't know if light's the right word, but they were in that same mold where it was, okay, they're going to be able to come out and put 100 on you. But it's like, oops, they can also give up 102 like they did to Colorado. And so it's that became the issue for, for some of those teams, because really the entire season, there were only 2 teams that were really, really good on both sides of the floor. And that was Tennessee and Auburn. And that's why the Auburn one was so disappointing, is because they felt like the second most reliable team outside of Tennessee, just because you could depend on them defensively. So I think, with what Jans has done at Mississippi State, I think he has put them in a position to where they're not a high seed, but at least they're getting to the tournament. They drew a Michigan State team that just had the right formula to beat them. I mean, A&M, it's always feels like it's a little up and down, but they find a way to get it rolling. And my goodness, I mean, they're a couple plays away from beating Houston and going to the Sweet 16, and who knows what happens after that. And so Lamont Paris resurgence for South Carolina. So I think the tournament was disappointing as a whole, just because you felt like a couple more of those teams should have made longer runs in this thing. But I think when you look at the teams that made it, and again, the potential resurgence of certain programs like a South Carolina, like a Florida, I feel like you at least look at this league, and we know Arkansas is going to be in the tournament next year. And so, you're looking around saying, man, there's not a lot of teams. And like we said, Beard is going to have going to have Ole Miss, in a situation where you feel like they're going to have a chance to make the tournament. There are not a lot of teams in the SEC anymore where I think we look at it and say, what's going to happen here? And I think that's a good thing, because even if you have some of these disappointing starts to tournaments and all that, the league as a whole is still in a pretty fantastic shape. And that's why I think Cal going to Arkansas was perfect, because I don't know that Cal takes any other job in the SEC other than that one. And it's like, now it makes the league stronger if you add a Scott Drew to Kentucky or someone like that. And it's wild how everything played out. So
That's before you had Texas, who's very good, and Oklahoma
Right.
is very solid. Porter Moser, I think the Sooners were the first team out in this.
Final Four coach.
Yeah,
Adding
sure.
another guy who's been to a Final Four. It's like, my goodness. So,
All right.
yeah.
So last thing, we just watched the women's tournament put up monumental numbers. Caitlin Clark just captivated the country. I think there's a lot of reasons for that. One of the reasons that I think, Blake, and it's an interesting thing, at least for me, is that people got to know her over the course of years. This wasn't just a phenomenon that came out of nowhere like a comet. No, we've known about Caitlin Clark for a while. The men's game doesn't really have that dynamic where we know the players year over year. There's so much movement, guys. Not only one and done, but the transfer portals and that kind of thing. Is there something that the men's game can take from the women's game, or was that just Caitlin Clark being this phenomenon at this moment in time that everybody was captivated by? She kind of became, for lack of a better term, America's sweetheart a little bit.
Yeah, it's probably a combination because, like you said, there is an aspect where she's just a once in a whatever, type player that's going to come through and put the game to the level that she put it. And I think that's just something that happens every now and then. And of course, credit to her because she is the one that, as you said, was there year after year and continues to, grow her game to a point to where she can just take over the world. Like that's basically what she did. But I think on the men's side, like it's one of those things where think about this. Like let's say 5, 6 years ago, we're having the same conversation and we're playing trivia on let's guess who's on this roster. We'd have felt pretty confident, probably to say, okay, well, yeah, I know that guy's coming back. And if you ask me that right now, I mean, I don't know. I couldn't tell you who's on probably 75 or more percent of the SEC rosters right now. It's probably higher. Like, I don't know. And people ask me like over the past couple of days, like, what do you think about this guy? I'm like, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know. Like, is he still on the team? Like, I don't know.
Yeah,
And so,
I mean, the Calipari line yesterday was, I went to meet
yeah,
with the team and there were 3 guys and they're all in the portal. I mean, it was
well,
like, yeah,
that's what it was funny because we were having this conversation before. I'm like, is Cal, how many people are on the roster? Like, and when he said 3, I'm like, well, I lost the bet because I thought it was like 2.
I thought
And
none.
yeah, like, it's just, and I think that's the issue now. And sure, we know, as I always said, it's hey, players getting the opportunity to have the opportunities that they have now is a good thing. Like they are getting a chance to succeed, and we know how much money is made off these guys, and I get it, but I think it makes it harder. Again, you don't see many Caitlin Clarks now where they are just there's one person who is just staying at this school for this long and just captivating you year after year after year. And like you said too, it's where you add in the era we're in, social media and all this other stuff gives you a chance to tell their stories and do all this other stuff to really market them and promote them and get their name out there to where it is kind of raising the stock of your program. And so I think that's the challenge is I mean, that's you just don't know. Like, you're not going to have that continuity. And look, why did UConn win back-to-back national championships? Because they had some continuity. And I know that's different than the Caitlin Clark thing, but it's you were able to
Purdue had a lot of continuity. I mean,
right.
that was a team that had
Same
been
thing.
together for a minute.
Yeah, and so like you could lean into UConn's story because hey, we saw them do this last year. Look at all the same pieces. And so I'm more invested because I want to see can these guys who we saw do it last year, they now have another year of experience. They've grown, we've learned about them, all this other stuff. Can they do it again? That's a great story to hook you and want to see how it unfolds. But that's just, you're not going to have that every year. And I think it's just because of what we see now. It's going to be harder to do because you don't have those kind of people who are in one place for 4 years. But either one, whether it's someone staying for 4 years or being in one place for whatever many years, like that's just not something we see a lot in the men's game. And I don't think that's going to change. So it's going to be a challenge. So.
Blake, really appreciate your time. You guys do a great job, Chris Lee and you and everybody. As baseball season gets at the halfway point of the SEC season, a lot of baseball content, SEC college baseball content as well at southeastern14.com. You did a great job all year. We really enjoyed it. Thanks for the wrap up here. Appreciate it.
No, I always appreciate it, Neal. Thanks for having me on.
That was Blake Lovell of southeastern14.com. Really appreciate his time tonight. Robbie Faulk's as well. So Campbell Clinic Hotline is open. I'll take a few calls if you guys have them. If you don't, that's okay. It's an absolutely gorgeous evening here in Oxford after 3 rainy evenings in a row. The Masters starting to wind down, I think. A bunch of people still on the course. They got started late because of the rain in Georgia earlier this morning, I should say. So they got off to a 2.5 hour delay on their start. So I'm going to guess, I haven't read this, I don't know, I'm not a golf guy. I would guess that everyone's not going to finish the first round tonight. There's going to be some guys that finish the first round tomorrow. I told you about NBA as we record this on Thursday evening. If the playoffs began today, the play-in in the East, and this is worth noting with all the Billy Donovan talk, the Chicago Bulls and the Atlanta Hawks would play in the 9-10 game. The loser would be eliminated. The winner would play the loser of the Philadelphia 76ers Miami Heat play-in game. The Boston Celtics are the 1 seed. That's wrapped up. They will play the 8 seed, again, which would be one of those play-in teams. The Milwaukee Bucks are the 2 seed. A lot of injuries. Dame Lillard won't play tomorrow night against Oklahoma City. Giannis Antetokounmpo won't play the rest of the regular season. The Bucks are the 2 seed. That's pretty much wrapped up. So they'll get the 7 seed, which is still to be determined by the play-in. As of this moment, the New York Knicks, the Indiana Pacers would play the 3-6 series in the East, and the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Orlando Magic would play the 4-5. But Cleveland and the Knicks are separated by 1/2 game going into games tonight. So there's still some things to be played for in the East. In the West, and this is wild, if the season ended tonight and it ends on Sunday, the Lakers and the Warriors would play a game in Los Angeles in a 9-10 play-in. That's how good the West is. A 9-10 play-in. The winner would advance to play the loser of the Phoenix Sacramento game in Phoenix. The winner of that series would get the winner of that game. Phoenix and Sacramento would get the 7 seed. The loser would play the winner of the Lakers-Warriors game for the 8 seed. Right now, the Denver Nuggets, the defending champs, would be the 1 seed. They have a 1-game lead out west over both Minnesota and Oklahoma City. As of this moment, Minnesota is the 2 seed. So Denver would wait one of those play-ins. Minnesota would wait one of those play-ins. The 3-6 series would be the Thunder opening at home against the New Orleans Pelicans, and the Clippers opening at home against the Dallas Mavericks. The Pelicans, they're fighting to stay where they are. Phoenix is a 1/2 game behind New Orleans in the 7-6 race. Dallas could get the 4. They're only a game behind the Clippers, but Dallas has indicated that they're going to rest some people down the stretch. So a lot to be played for. I'm looking for schedule for this evening in the NBA. Man, the websites are bad. The Bulls play at the Pistons tonight. The Knicks play at the Celtics. That game getting started. I'm about to find that here in a minute. Actually, the Bulls lead 31-30 over the Pistons. Boston and the Knicks have just gotten started. Golden State plays at Portland, a game that the Warriors must win. The Pelicans and the Kings play each other tonight at 9. That's a big game. And then tomorrow, Friday night games of relevance. Orlando is at Philadelphia. The Bulls are at the Wizards. Indiana is at Cleveland. Brooklyn is at the Knicks. Raptors and the Heat play in Miami. The Lakers are in Memphis tomorrow night. Atlanta plays at Minnesota. The Bucks play at OKC. Denver is in San Antonio. The Spurs are they're pretty much sitting everybody the rest of the way. Detroit's in Dallas. The Pelicans go out to Golden State. It's a big game there. Utah is at the Clippers. Phoenix is at Sacramento. So and then no game Saturday and a big slate of games on Sunday that could determine some things. I'm looking for games that might be significant. Bulls at the Knicks. Denver is at Memphis. They should have things clinched by then. Phoenix is at Minnesota. That could be a big game from seeding purposes. The Lakers at the Pelicans, another big game. Dallas is in Oklahoma City Sunday afternoon. Utah at Golden State. The Rockets are at the Clippers. Portland is at Sacramento, and then the playoffs get started. The play-in games on Tuesday and Wednesday, and then also Friday, and then everything gets going next weekend with the NBA playoffs. So should be a pretty interesting slate of games. What do the Grizzlies do in the draft? What do they need? So I'll pull up my trusty Tankathon website. I'll tell you what the draft looks like if it were held today. Hit a refresh on the Tankathon. So I just did a lottery, just did a spin. I'll do another one. All right, so I've got Detroit with the first pick again, Washington second, San Antonio third, the Hornets fourth, Blazers fifth, Raptors sixth, Memphis seventh, Utah with the eighth pick. Their pick is protected, top 10, so they'll hold on to it. Brooklyn 9, the Hawks 10, the Bulls 11. Houston's pick is top 4 protected, so it would go to Oklahoma City. The Thunder would pick 12th. Blazers would pick 13th. That's the Warriors pick. And the Pelicans would pick 14th. That's the Lakers pick. I'll do another little spin here and see if it's any different. I did another spin. I got Detroit, Brooklyn, San Antonio, Atlanta, Washington, Charlotte, Portland, Spurs going 8th, getting the Toronto's pick. Memphis 9th, Utah 10th, Bulls 11th, Thunder 12th, Blazers 13th, Pelicans 14th. I mean, the Grizzlies just need players. They need to get their guys healthy. They got good legal news on John Morant this week. They need to get him back. They just need to get everybody back in. They played more players this year than any NBA franchise. So they just need dudes who can play. But they're going to get a bunch of guys back. Memphis will be right back in the mix next year. This will be a learning season for them. They have a great organization. This was a nightmare of a season. And it was one that you can sort of see coming with the suspension at the end of the year and all of that stuff. I'm about to check this number and make sure it works. I checked it earlier. I guess I checked it yesterday, and it worked. I'm checking my phone on it to make sure it works. It does. Okay, so it works. If anybody wants to call in, phone line's open 662-426-1464. If not, no big deal. I'll wrap it here shortly, and we'll get you to a weekend of coverage. We'll have Grove Bowl games coverage. I keep wanting to call it the Grove Bowl games coverage on Saturday afternoon. Chase will have baseball coverage starting tomorrow night. Ole Miss, Mississippi State, 7:30 out at Swayze on Friday. 7 on Friday, 7:30 on Saturday, 1:30 on Sunday. We'll have coverage of all of that. I'll have 10 weekend thoughts, all of those things to you. There are no hand raised guys next Thursday. I'll be out of pocket this time next week, and then we'll get back here in a couple of weeks. Hey, who do we have? Hold on one second. Let me get to you. There you go. Who do we have? Hey, caller, who do we have?
Hey, it's Leif.
Hey, Leif, what's up, man?
Oh, nothing. You talking to NBA? I figured I'd call in because, not enough people love the NBA like we did.
So what do you think? If I know you're a Thunder fan. Who are you hoping to see?
I don't really care. My wife really has learned to love this team this year, and there's a lot to love about this team. I love how young they are and how much they seem to like each other. They feel like an older college team instead of like an NBA team. they're really tight young guys.
Yeah.
But like every night, I have to sort of talk her off the ledge. She's like, "Oh my gosh, we've lost 3 straight." And I'm just like, "Don't worry, you know, J-Dub's out, SGA's out. You know, it's a long season. Sometimes you just lose." But I don't really care who you play, as long as I keep on telling her that we are ahead of schedule and we just need to get a first round win. If we make it, I mean, I would be ecstatic.
Oh yeah.
With us going to the
If you told me that the Thunder were in the Western Conference semifinals this season, I'd be thrilled. That'd be major accomplishment. You know, they're going to have to get past the Pelicans or the Suns or maybe even the Lakers. I hope it's not the Lakers. I worry about the Lakers just because of the Lakers' experience. I think the Thunder can handle the Suns. I think the Thunder can handle the Pelicans. Those are 2 teams I think they can handle. And then, look, if they get Minnesota in a second round match, that's one hell of a series.
Oh, yeah. I was at the game in December when the Timberwolves played the Thunder, and it was an exciting game. I mean, each team, I think it was 40-40 after the first quarter. I mean, it was the most amazing offensive basketball game I've ever seen. But yeah, I don't really care who we play. I think these guys are young enough and just inexperienced enough to say we win. And I mean, sometimes they not knowing that you're supposed to lose is just a hell of a way to be playing.
Yeah, I mean,
what's Carson think?
Oh, I mean, he thinks sort of the same thing. He and I almost went up there this weekend, but he didn't feel very good. We were going to combine the weekend with the 2 games, and he was going to maybe do a college visit, but he just didn't feel good, so we didn't do it. I don't know. By the way, we're going to bring Chasing the Ring back for the playoffs. We're going to do some live stream shows where we watch playoff games and talk about games. For those of you that like the NBA the way that we do, we'll do those shows. Won't interfere with anything else that we do, by the way. Won't take away from any of the baseball stuff or spring football or transfer portal or all those shows that we might do, but we might just do some basketball specific stuff because why not? I don't know. I think he's like me. He knows that if you follow the history of the NBA, most young teams take their lumps in the playoffs the first time. And that, you know, there's probably coming a series. I mean, in an ideal world, this team would win a first-round series, maybe even pull off an upset against the Timberwolves and then, you know, get their lumps against Denver. Because what you would love to see is for them to get a lot of data, a lot of playoff data that Sam Presti and company could evaluate and look at and go, okay, we have all of these assets. We have all of these future assets. Here is where we got exploited in the playoff. This is where we got exposed in the playoffs. This is where we excelled in the playoffs. This is what we must improve on to make the next step. And you get that data, and then you can take those assets and you can evaluate and you can say, okay, well, do we run this back another year with this same group and let's see if just the experience and the maturity closes that gap? Or do you look at it and go, oh, no, there's a glaring need here, and here's how we fill it. That's what's interesting to me is I don't think there's any real significant chance. I mean, like what 1% that the Thunder win the NBA title? Probably less than 1%. And so what's to me, what would be interesting is to get enough data, you know, 6, 12, 17 NBA playoff games in an ideal world where you get a lot of data to look at and go, okay, here's where we go from here.
Yeah. Well, that was one of the things, like, I hated that loss at Philadelphia, but I think, talking about data, I think Joe trying to hit those 3-pointers at the end of the game, I think that was that data Presti was looking for. Remember when Presti, when they put Harden out with the first team right before he was traded, they sat Russ and they let Harden just try running it as the one, and they realized, hey, this guy's a great player, but he's not going to take us there. And that's when Presti traded him.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of those things, that letting Joe do that against his old team, just, let him get those lumps in a regular season game that doesn't really mean a lot. And maybe he'll rise to the occasion in the playoffs.
I mean, I hate that SGA missed time, but I'm sort of glad that he missed time because it forced them to play some lineups with Giddey at the point. It forced them to play some lineups, especially with SGA and Jalen Williams out. It forced them to sort of experiment with some different things. And again, those are data points that they're going to be able to take and evaluate and look at and figure out where they go from there. I think all in all, it probably is going to end up costing them the 2 seed. Maybe it even cost them the 1 seed, missing those games with SGA and Jalen Williams out. But I also kind of think it's going to end up helping them down the road.
Yeah, man, I love Giddey. I love the way Giddey plays. I really enjoy watching him play, and just
he's 21.
The fact that he's 21, and look what he's done this season. Where, I mean, there for a while, people were just daring him to shoot, and then he's dropping more triple doubles at Madison Square Garden and whatnot. So
yeah.
I love this team. It's one of the most fun teams I've ever watched and followed in anything. So
I'm the same way. I've really enjoyed this. I've enjoyed this season. It's been a lot of fun. It's like you said, they're kind of like a college team. They enjoy each other. It's fun. And look, but the next year the pressure ratchets up because next year there's going to be an expectation. Okay, because they've won 55, so they're going to win somewhere between 55 and 57 games. The expectation next year is going to be win 60 games, win the West, be a title contender, and that sometimes that pressure changes the way that guys behave. And then as guys get a little older and they start getting closer to that second contract and the big money, and that can change things. This year's the fun year because this is the free year. It's sort of the ride up the roller coaster. It's just kind of fun, but it starts getting real this time next year.
Yeah. And one other thing, just talking about my wife, she was, we live in Kentucky. She's an Arkansas grad. Sunday night, the news sort of broke about Calipari, and she was beside herself, not in a good way. She was pretty upset because she works with a lot of Kentucky fans, and she had, in the past week, she sort of changed it all. I watched the introduction with her last night, and now that I'm teaching, I don't get to listen to as many podcasts just because kids are always asking me questions. And, obviously I don't need to be teaching and listening to podcasts at the same time. But did y'all talk about that this morning about the press conference and just how it had a really weird vibe to me?
Yeah. Look, he was at Kentucky a long time. And so it feels weird to see him in a different venue. It's obvious that leaving Kentucky for him was emotional. It's also obvious that for him leaving Kentucky it was time. I think he's starting to feel some energy about this decision. And I don't know. Look, I said this earlier in the week. There's this obsession on the internet about making sure that everybody knows who rejected who, right? It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I mean, when the season rolls around, you either win or you lose. It ends up either being a good hire or a bad hire. Calipari, I keep mispronouncing his name. He'll either have juice and this will be rejuvenating, or he won't, and this will end up sort of looking like a nightmare. But for Arkansas, if you look at the energy that suddenly is around their program, it's a win for them. And for Kentucky, to me, I don't hold it against Kentucky that Nate Oats said no, or that Scott Drew said no, or that Danny Hurley said no. None of that matters once they get their guy, whoever it is that they get. And, it doesn't matter. that Chris Beard said no to Arkansas. It doesn't matter whether the Jerome Tang thing, which you could talk me in or out of whether he really had an offer. It doesn't matter. They ended up getting John Calipari. He's going to build whatever roster he builds. He united a fan base from an NIL standpoint. They'll either do well or they won't do well. All of that stuff, that to me, that backlash and all the obsession with, like, you know, whether Hunter Yurachek sits up there and says, hey, for the record, this is the only guy we offered. The word offer could have so much semantics to it. Like, he could be saying, hey, well, technically, we never offered a contract term sheet to Chris Beard. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know. Do I think that job was Chris Beard's if he wanted it last Friday? I do. But none of that stuff matters. Chris Beard made a decision to stay at Ole Miss. That will either end up being a great decision or a bad decision or somewhere in between, but we don't know the answer to that yet. I don't know why everybody in social media world is so obsessed with that part of it. I guess it's the need to have a win or a loss or whatever. Look, the truth is we won't know whether these decisions on anyone's part were good or bad for a while now. And there's a chance that it was good for everyone, that Chris Beard staying at Ole Miss was good for Ole Miss, that Chris Beard ended up saying no to Arkansas and they ended up with John Calipari ends up being good for them. And there's a possibility that for Kentucky, getting out from Calipari's contract and landing with somebody else who refreshes the whole brand up in Lexington ends up being a good thing. We won't know for a while.
Well, I don't. As far as the weirdness I thought it was just it just and Calipari is a different sort of cat anyway, and just the way he talked and the way they introduced him, and it was one of those things that they mentioned Kentucky a lot.
Sure.
I thought in a press conference more than. And I just think at some point that's when someone in PR says, okay. That's my son. He's okay. But it's one of those things that it's just at some point you just say, hey, hey, I had great years there. I'm looking forward to, these next years at Arkansas. I want to focus on the future, not the past. The brand here at Arkansas is come here, we're getting you to the NBA. And that's just it. And the fact that, I lived in Northwest Arkansas for years, and I saw many people introduced as coaches and whatnot, and they always called the Hogs. And it just seemed like Calipari got off the stage, didn't call the Hogs. And it just sort of seems like one of those things that, eventually, as all coaches fall out of favor, that's going to be one of the things they're going to say. There's going to be somebody up in Fayetteville or, Stuttgart saying, well, he was a good coach, but he never called the Hogs. That's just going to be one of those things that right now they're in love. They don't see those little things, and that seems like one of those things they're going to see. Later down the line.
Yeah, he's been there.
Anyway.
He was at Kentucky for a long time. The calling the Hogs thing can be awkward for anyone. That had to be super awkward for him. 48 hours after being the Kentucky coach. So I don't know. I didn't read a lot. I saw where everybody made a big deal out of that. I never thought there was any much of a chance that John Calipari was going to stand up at the top of the stage at age 65, a Hall of Fame coach, and go through the whole call the Hogs thing. I didn't think that was going to happen, and sure enough, it didn't. And there'll come a point where he'll do the hog call thing and all that stuff. Frankly, and I mean this respectfully to Arkansas, they do that thing too much. Just it's a little. Sometimes it's overkill on that. And it didn't. That had to be an emotional 72 hours for Cal. Had to be. He poured a lot of heart. He poured a lot of heart and soul into Kentucky. He kind of was. He was Kentucky basketball for a decade and a half.
Oh, absolutely. And he did a lot of things. He did a lot of things for my state. A lot of things that nobody nobody really publicized or anything like that. Stories that I've heard and stuff, especially now that it's come out that they parted ways. But yeah, I mean, it sucks that they did, that they didn't get to end on that high note. But I think eventually, like all things, time heals all wounds.
Oh, sure.
Is going to mend things up, and they'll put a banner up with his name at some point.
Yes,
but, hey,
they will.
I don't know, man. I've lived in this state for a long time, and I've seen a lot of crazy people. So anyway, hey, good talking to you. Give Carson my best and tell him thunder up for me.
Thanks, Leif. Appreciate you. Alan says about Sam Presti being wrong on James Harden. I mean, he was and he wasn't. He made that trade after the 2012 NBA Finals, and he got Kevin Martin. He got a pick that ended up being Steven Adams. And that Thunder team the next season had the best record in the NBA. There was a Thunder team that was probably going to go back to the NBA Finals, maybe win the NBA Finals, and then Russell Westbrook got hurt in the series against Houston. They ended up losing to the Grizzlies. So, I mean, just kind of fate worked against them a little bit. But if they win a title that year, nobody goes, oh, the Harden trade sucked. Hey, who do we have?
Hey, man, it's Bobbin.
Hey, Bobbin, what's up, man?
Not much. I catch you in the middle of NBA talk?
No, we're good. Talk about whatever.
No, I was just asking because I think my company's going to give me tickets to one of Apparel's first playoff games, but now I'm kind of sweating it because I saw last night this crazy stat that they could finish anywhere from like 4th to 7th or 8th, and they'd have to be in the play-in if they don't close the next couple of games out. They've got like a very wide range of where they could get locked in seeding-wise.
Yeah, I'm pulling up their spot right now. So as of this moment, they would be the 6th seed. But if you look at the standings, they are 47 and 32. They can't get to 5. They're just they're 2.5 back of Dallas, so they're not catching the Mavericks. They're a half game ahead. Okay. They're a half game ahead of Phoenix. They are 2 games ahead of Sacramento, 2.5 ahead of the Lakers. So realistically, they're either going to be the 6, the 7, or at worst the 8. They're probably either the 6 or the 7. So they're good. The problem if they're the 7 is that obviously you've got to get into the play-in. So you've got to either beat the 8, or if you lose, you've got to beat the winner of the 9-10 game. So you're going to have to win a play-in game. So it'd be 2 years in a row that the Pelicans would be in the play-in. Last year they were the 9, and they lost to the Thunder in the 9-10 play-in game.
I mean, they're talented. They're a solid team that has a very hard time being consistent.
The West is loaded. That's the other.
They're about to peer pressure themselves into giving a max deal, and Zion just doesn't feel like he's a max type player right now.
Here's the problem: if you don't give Zion the max deal, and you end up doing some deal where you trade him, and then he becomes the player that you think he can become, you regret it forever. And if you almost have no choice but to give him the max deal. I mean, look, they're 47 and they're 47 and 30.
I mean, I get that. Yeah.
They're 47 and 32. If they were in the East, they would be tied with the Knicks for the 3 seed. The West is that good.
Yeah.
Denver has 56 wins. Minnesota and Oklahoma City have 55 wins. The Clippers have 51 wins. The Mavericks have 50 wins. I mean, there's 5 teams in the West with 50 or more wins. That tells you how talented, how deep, how brutal the West is. And those are the teams that you're playing all year. And the Pelicans are sitting at 47 and 32. I mean, that's a very good record. I mean, they're a really good team. They're 31 and 20 inside the conference, 11 and 5 in their division. They're 25 and 15 at home, 25 and 15. Wait, I'm reading the Mavericks. 21 and 18 at home, 26 and 14 on the road. I mean, the Pels are good. They're just in a conference that has an elite team in Denver, and then 4 really good teams: Wolves, Thunder, Clippers, Mavericks. I mean, all of those teams are good, and then Phoenix is a good team. Sacramento's a good team. Sacramento's got 45 wins. I mean, the Lakers, here's the best example. The Lakers with LeBron James, as of tonight, 45 wins. If you put the Lakers in the East, they're tied for the 7. I mean, there's a marked difference. The West is just very hard to navigate.
Yeah, and all its best teams seem like they're just getting started too. Like they're going to be around for a while. Like, I mean, Golden State's obviously fading away. LeBron, I mean, it's not his window's over. I mean, I think it's been over for a couple seasons now. But
yeah, they're not winning. They're not winning a title.
No, they're not. I mean, Minnesota's young. Oklahoma City's obviously super young. I mean, Denver, they feel, I don't think they're that old of a team. Like they're going to have a window still. Like I don't think their window's remotely closed. But so I want to ask you one thing.
Mm-hmm.
So Calipari at Arkansas, I think he's going to do a little bit better than Musselman. And that's probably just going to be fine. Okay, how old is he right now? He's in his 60s, right?
He's 65.
Okay, so, I mean, I don't know how much you know about him. Is he the type of guy that you think is going to be coaching in Fayetteville until he's in his 70s or close to his 70s?
I mean, that's what the
Do
contract.
you think this is like one of those deals? He's going to be there. What now?
That's what the contract says. Look, here's the deal with Calipari and with anyone in college coaching right now. And I get scolded on this because people get mad at me for talking about NIL, but it's kind of all about NIL, right? So you either, let's just say that what people are saying around the Arkansas program is true. I'm not saying it is. I'm saying for the sake of this thought exercise, let's just say that it is. Okay? Is that fair? He's got somewhere between $5 and $7 million, maybe more, to work with NIL. Well, that puts that program in rarefied air, maybe at the very top of the college basketball game in terms of player acquisition resources. Is Cal motivated to put together the kind of roster to make a run, to middle finger to Kentucky? Is he all that? I don't know. Like, we're going to find out. I can't sit here and go, oh, yeah, dude's dialed in. He's going to knock it out of the park. On the flip side, I can't sit here and go, no, he's old. He's tired. This is just a money grab. I don't know. We'll find out.
Here's my thing, though. I think to an extent, the game has kind of passed him by a little. Not a lot, but a little. In the past 5 to 10 years. I mean, my God, 10 years ago, I feel like they were going to freaking Final Four every other year.
Yeah, but Vibin, they made massive adjustments offensively this season at Kentucky. They were a completely different team. They really caught up with like all of the stuff that the knock on Cal the last couple of years had been, well, they don't shoot the three, they don't play fast, they don't get out in transition. This team did. I mean, they got to the tournament and they played Oakland. I don't know if you listened to the interview with Blake Lovell a minute ago, but Blake was talking about how that was a terrible matchup for Kentucky. And then they had these freshmen.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
okay.
They had these freshmen who in that moment got tight. And this is the crazy thing about the tournament. It's the reason that I always refer to this quote that Billy Donovan said about the NCAA tournament. He said, the thing about the tournament is you could turn around as soon as it's over and restart it and play it again, and you would not get the same result. Like if Auburn played Yale in a 7-game series, Auburn's winning that bitch in 5. It is. Auburn's winning that series in 5 games. Yale just happened to win
one
game.
night, though.
Yale won game 1.
Yeah.
If Kentucky played Oakland in a 7-game series, Kentucky wins the series. But Oakland got him on game one. The 26-year-old kid had the game of his life. They'll be talking about it forever. It was incredible. It's what makes the tournament special, right? But it gets you, it makes people overreact to what happened. I thought Kentucky really adjusted offensively to the modern times. I thought the game passed Cal by stuff, I thought that argument kind of went by the wayside this year. I didn't agree. Now, he goes to Arkansas. He inherits a roster that has nothing on it right now. He is literally starting from scratch, building a new roster. He's got a lot of cachet. People know who he is. Kids are going to answer the phone when John Calipari calls because of how many people he's put in the NBA. Now, if the rumors are true, and again, I don't know if they are, does he really have $7 million? I don't know. I'm not there. If he does,
I mean, look, they gave one of their boosters, one single booster at that press conference, a standing ovation. Now, I don't know how much he gave, but
I mean, he's a big part of the reason that he's there. So I don't know.
Right.
Does that result in players or does it not? We'll find out. I mean, again, I don't know. We'll find out. And then, does he get rejuvenated? Is he end up getting there and kind of hit the wall and go, man, I made a mistake? I mean, all of that stuff's on the table. The truth is we just won't know for a minute. But the one thing that I thought was the most interesting from all the reporting of the Calipari thing, it was Shams Charania and Kyle Tucker, two phenomenal reporters, who both talked about how Cal felt like. Now, was this truth? I don't know. But Cal told people, and he felt like at Kentucky, he had to drum up NIL. And one of the things that appealed to him about Arkansas was that Arkansas said, hey, here, we're going to give it to you. You can just go use it. You don't have to go drum it up. We'll find out. I mean, look, the jury's out. It's absolutely premature to come down with the verdict of Cal's going to win big at Arkansas. There's nothing to justify that there's no reason you can't justify that statement. On the flip side, the people that are like, this is going to be an unmitigated disaster, there's absolutely nothing to justify that right now either. We'll find out. But right now, it's way too early to go, it's this or it's this. We don't know.
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, the league's the SEC's just a damn beast in basketball now.
And gets harder.
I mean,
it gets harder. Texas is
that
good. Oklahoma's good.
And I mean, Texas, when they got the right coach in there, I mean, that's the thing. I feel like people are kind of a little nervous right now because Ole Miss hadn't done a lot in the transfer portal in basketball, which is fine. I just think they're being patient. That's just my take. I don't think they're dragging their feet or anything. But, I mean, how many teams in the league can you legitimately say were awful this past season? Vanderbilt, Missouri, and I guess Arkansas.
Yeah, that's about right.
The rest of it, yeah. So the 11 other teams in the league, they weren't all great or just tournament caliber teams, but none of them sucked. I mean, hell, LSU looked like they were going to be a train wreck in the non-con, and then they got their shit together and they started pulling off some, wins against better teams.
Yeah.
Or favored teams, I should say.
Yeah. Well, even the bad teams challenge people. I mean, Vanderbilt beat Florida. I mean, go back and look at the end of the season. I mean, this is the last day of the regular season. Arkansas probably should have beaten Alabama in Tuscaloosa. I mean, it was a bad call at the end that cost them what would have been a 4-point lead with 10 seconds left. I mean, the league was good.
Well, Arkansas beat A&M. They were a tournament team.
Yeah, the league was good. The league was good. People do the NCAA tournament thing. Again, I mean, it's that one game deal. I mean, Texas A&M took Houston to overtime in the tournament. They could have easily won that game.
Yeah. So are you going to participate in the hot dog eating contest Saturday or
no? No, I have not been invited, and if I were, I would politely decline. I'm not a big hot dog eating person.
I don't know how those people do it. Quite frankly, it makes me a little nauseous. But
yeah, watching.
I mean, I don't know. More power to them. I'm really impressed from a marketing standpoint how they're just doing the whole spring game thing.
Yeah, look,
I think it's a genius move.
Lane Kiffin, or whoever is around that program that's making these things happen it's absolute genius. They have. It took stones, frankly, to go. You know what? These spring games are stupid, so we're not going to play one. You know what? These spring games cause headaches, so we're not going to play one. And then to come back and go, and you know what we're going to do? We're going to have a hot dog eating contest. We're going to have an obstacle course race. We're going to have a slam dunk competition. We're going to play flag football 7-on-7. We're going to create all the jokes. Yeah, but they're also creating that deal where in a world where things don't go well next season, and for the record, I think Ole Miss is going to win 11 games. But in a world where they don't, they're creating an easy, total bullshit, but easy thing where people can criticize. And he doesn't care. And there's something very freeing for a person when he or she no longer gives a damn what people say. That's incredibly. This
is the most comfortable I think he's ever been since he has been a head coach.
I mean,
I think it's not even close.
I mean, I wasn't around the FAU program or whatnot, but no, he's more comfortable today at Ole Miss than he was when he first got to Ole Miss. I can tell you that. And he's running his program, and he understands that nothing that happens in April is going to win a game in October. Nothing. Zero. And so let April be what April is, right? I mean, that's what he's doing, and he's very consistent about it, and I think it's genius. I mean, and he's going to actually turn a spring quote game into something that will at least be funny. I mean, it'll be entertaining. Is it that there will be idiots in my field who ask about what the wide receivers did in the 7-on-7? I'm just telling you that's coming, and it's coming, and he'll look at those people like they have a cobra coming out of their nose, but they're going to play flag football. They're going to have an obstacle course. They're going to bring some students, fraternity kids, sorority kids out of the stadium and do things, and they're going to have some probably support staff like strength coaches and stuff, see how many hot dogs they can eat in 10 minutes. I don't know what they're going to do, but it's going to be funny, and people around the country will talk about it, and come September, it won't matter. It won't matter at all. Nothing that happens on Saturday is going to win or lose them a football game in the fall.
Yeah, 100%. Last thing, I've been hearing it for a few weeks now. How crazy is this next transfer portal window going to look for football?
Around the country? Insane.
Yeah.
Insane. Yeah. I mean, at Ole Miss specifically.
I know you watched Josh Pate. Josh Pate went on his show, and I think he did like a little segment about it. He made it sound like it's going to be anarchy.
Yeah, I mean, I asked Lane about it a couple weeks ago, and he said he'd heard the same thing I've heard, which is that it's going to be sort of nuts. And I don't think it's good for the game. I don't think it's good for the sport. But I have people push back. I'm going to try to refrain from this for a while and let it play out. But I don't think Ole Miss is going to be super active. I think they're going to fill a few spots. They're probably going to lose a couple of guys. But I don't think they're going to be one of the teams that's like majorly active. But I think you're going to see guys all over the country have the opportunity to get in the portal and leave. And here's the crazy part. They might be able to get back in the portal in August and leave again.
Yeah, that's just kind of how it is right now. Speaking of, I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I swear this is the last thing. Have you heard about this shit going on at Missouri with Drinkwitz?
Yeah, I don't think there's any truth to it.
Okay. All right. I didn't mean to put you on the spot like that. I was curious.
Yeah,
I've seen a couple of things about it. I was like, yeah, that would be nuts, but
I don't.
All right, man,
I don't think it's.
You're
welcome. Thank you. I don't think there's any accuracy to it. All right, thanks to Leif and Vibin for their calls. It's a little after 7. I haven't even looked at like SEC baseball scores. I don't know that it matters. Ole Miss and Mississippi State tomorrow night. So Campbell Clinic Hotline open for a couple of minutes. Yeah, Alabama's going to be really active according to Grind. I think there's going to be a whole lot happening. Just in general, I think you're going to see a lot of guys put their toe in the water too. Knowing that they can come back to where they are. I think that you're going to see some guys jump in the portal or not even actually get in the portal, but put some feelers out just in case. And then if they get what they're looking for, they'll jump in the portal and then go from there. Let's see. I'll pull up I think there are a couple of SEC games tonight. I'll navigate one of the worst websites in the history of websites. SECsports.com. Scores this evening. Let's see. Georgia leads Missouri 3-1. That game in the bottom of the 4th in Athens. And Kentucky 11-1 in the SEC. The Kentucky Wildcats are at Auburn. They lead the Tigers 2-0. That game in the top of the 3rd on ESPNU. The other series this weekend, Missouri. I mentioned Missouri at Georgia. South Carolina's at Florida. Arkansas is at Alabama. The Razorbacks 11-1. Vanderbilt is at Texas A&M. 2 highly ranked teams. 2 teams both 8-4 in the SEC. LSU at 3-9 in the SEC. They head to Tennessee. The Vols are 7-5, and of course Mississippi State is at Ole Miss. That game tomorrow night at 7 on the SEC network. So there's your SEC baseball update. All right, probably going to wrap it up here. Been going for a little over 2 hours and 20 minutes or so. So we'll probably wrap here. Appreciate the people that called. And be back on Monday with another Blue Sky Live. We'll wrap up Ole Miss spring football. We'll wrap up the Grove Bowl games, whatever that entails. It should be fun. And Ole Miss, Mississippi State. Baseball, I should say. Basketball recruiting, and then, of course, on Monday, the football portal opens again, and that promises to be quite nutty over the first week and a half, 2 weeks. So, again, our thanks to Robbie Faulk of On3. He covers Mississippi State, does a great job. Our thanks to Blake Lovell of Southeastern14.com. Thanks to everyone who called, participated in the chat, and more. For Chase Parham, I'm Neal McCready. Talk to you again on Monday morning, Blue Sky Live. Have a great weekend. Be safe if you're coming up, and I will talk to you again soon.